Chapter 2 The Journey to Kofuchu. On the rough walls of the shed, two flies were running up and down as if there were a purpose to their wandering. I had been watching them, wondering why they did not fall down, and thinking one of them was I and the other was Yone. It was early morning, and though the sun had risen already, I guessed it was still the hour of the tiger. I had been awake long, listening to the noises from outside. Some soldiers had already left. I had heard the sound of their horses' hooves as the riders made the animals canter. Now the flies were in the air, circling above my head. How nice if one would be able to fly. Then my mother and I could have flown away yesterday, and she would still be alive. Lying as close to me as she could, Yone was snoring, her mouth a little open. I thought how much prettier my mother had looked when she was sleeping. One of the flies landed on her nose and began to polish its wings with its legs. Yone sniffed in annoyance. The fly stopped its morning toilet and flew away. Just then there was a sudden sound from outside, and the girl woke with a little scream. As she sat up and saw me, she covered her mouth with her hand. "I am hungry," I said, a demand that usually resulted in food being brought to me. Yone looked in fear towards the door that hid and protected us from the dangers outside. I repeated my command, for I was still Debushi's son, and she was still my servant. Yone pulled the door ajar and looked outside. I too wanted to see, but she pushed me inside. "You stay here and don't make any noise," she admonished. To my surprise, she was talking to me as if I were indeed her younger brother. Then, before I had time to object, she had slipped outside and closed the door behind her. As soon as Yone was gone, I wished I hadn't asked for her food and sent her away. Once left alone, I grew frightened, and all that happened yesterday became real again. Two of the boards in the wall did not fit together and left a slit I could look through. The yard at the back of our own house was filled with soldiers. They were poor farmers who had to follow the samurai who were their masters. None that I could see were the swords of a samurai. This made me less fearful, thinking them too mean to have any rights over me. Yone returned with a bowl of the same millet gruel that served as our dinner the night before. But she was not alone. The soldier who had discovered and dragged us from our hiding place was with her. I sat on the floor when they entered. The soldier looked down on me with disgust, for he had been told to keep an eye on us until we reached the castle of Takeda Shingen at Kofuchu. Suddenly he grinned and pointed to my feet. I was still wearing a pair of soft deerskin shoes. When my mother had dressed me in rags, she had either forgotten or simply didn't have the heart to take my shoes away. "Take them off," the soldier commanded, and I obeyed, even handing them to him when he stretched out his hand. "I have a son your age. They will fit him." The soldier laughed, and spying the two flies on the wall, he lifted one of the shoes and swatted. Recalling I had named one of the flies Yone and the other after myself, I wondered which one had been killed. "My feet hurt," I complained to Yone, but she, having walked barefoot through the 12 years of her life, did not care. "I can't walk any further. You carry me," I suggested. "You walk." Yone didn't even cast a glance. She was looking ahead at the long row of pack horses, but then she held out her hand. "I couldn't carry you. You're too heavy," she said, and smiling with a grown-up's cunning, she added, "You are much too big to be carried." At the crossing of a stream, we had halted to give both animals and men a chance to drink and rest, but not nearly long enough to suit me. It was fall, and the rice had been harvested several weeks before, and now the nights were cold in the mountains. The soldiers were eager to press forward, hoping to either find shelter for the night or to reach the great level plain of Kai. They'd already spent 2 nights shivering around fires in the mountains. "Look!" I pointed to my feet. A stone had cut the skin and the gash was still bleeding. "Put your feet in the water, boy. That will stop the bleeding." I looked up. Instead of Yone, it was a soldier who was standing behind me. Dutifully I obeyed. The water was not yet winter cold, and it felt pleasant on my weary feet. "Would you like to ride?" the soldier asked. "You are not used to going barefoot." "Thank you," I nodded, saying yes to both. One of the horses carried only half a load of rice, and for the rest of the day I was allowed to sit astride it. This was my first time on horseback, for I had been deemed too young to ride even the oldest and most docile of my father's mares. That night we reached the foothills of the Great Valley, crossed by 2 rivers, where Takeda Shingen's residence, Tsuchigasaki Castle, stood. My father's village was located in a narrow dale with a few rice fields, and he had numbered the people he had reigned over in hundreds. As we made our way across the Great Plain, it surprised me that the world contained so many people. Rice fields were there in plenty, and all of them were much larger than the ones in my poor mountain home. We came to toll gates where ordinary travelers had to pay in order to pass, but we, carrying Lord Shingen's rice, had no need to. The men guarding the gates saluted us, and having heard of the great victory, they had shouted words of encouragement while they greedily counted the horses to find out how many koku of rice we were carrying. On the 4th day of our journey, we entered Kofuchu. This was no village, but a proper town. Here were strange sights to stare at enough to please anyone. On the outskirts of town lived the poor in houses that were mere hovels, meaner than any in our village. From here a band of ragged children escorted us until they annoyed the soldiers so much that they shooed them away, giving them a few raps over the bare legs with sticks they had been using on their horses. The children frightened both Yone and me a little. They were so different from the children we were used to. They did not seem the least bit scared of the soldiers. One of them even laughed when he was hit. One of the soldiers took great pleasure in dealing out this punishment, darting among the children and hitting them as hard as he could. He was a man older than the rest, but his age gained him no respect, for the others treated him with contempt. During our journey he had showed himself no friend to me, taking delight in reminding me of the fate of my parents. Once while we were eating, Yone held a bowl of rice gruel in her hands, and he had pushed her so that she spilled it. He laughed, but the other soldiers did not share in his mirth, and one of them even gave some food to Yone. As we passed by the entrance of Takeda Castle, the soldier left his horse and grabbing me by my shoulder, pushed me, pointed to something on the wall. "Bow to your father," he shouted. I looked in the direction he indicated. There on stakes were the heads of human beings. "Take a hold of mine." He forced me to bow towards these grisly relics. "Leave the boy be," the soldier who was put in charge of me shouted. "I'm just teaching him respect for his parents," my tormentor grinned, but let go of me. I ran to the soldier whom I had learned to consider my protector. "You let that boy be, or I shall put your head among the rest of them," he shouted to the older soldier. "Get back to your horse," he commanded. Making a face as he obeyed, the bully returned to his horse, which had broken rank and was walking ahead of the rest. "Those are the heads of bandits captured many weeks ago," the soldier explained, pointing in the direction of the trophies on the wall. "Keep far away from that man. There's little good in him," he advised. "He is a wasp in autumn. He stings without reason." After the rice had been unloaded in a storehouse and the horses were taken to a field and turned loose, our guide told us that he would take us to the mansion of Akiyama Nobutomo. On the way there, we passed a group of boys more richly dressed than I had ever seen, grown-ups. One of them had boots with fur showing at their tops. I think I noticed those particularly because my own feet were bare. "Who were they?" I asked. "The one with the sword was the Wakopno, Lord Shingen's son." The soldier made a grimace not altogether complimentary. "For him you cannot bow low enough, and should he kick you, remember to thank him." I looked back. The boy with the fur-lined boots also wore a sword. He could not have been much more than 10 years old, I thought. "Where are we going?" Yone asked as the soldier led us down an alley. "I have orders to hand you over to someone in the cookhouse," our guide laughed. "Did you expect Lord Akiyama to come in person to receive you?" "He said I was supposed to take care of his horses," I complained, feeling that the kitchen was not a fit place for a samurai's son. "That might be so, but I think he wants you to grow a little first." The soldier had stopped in front of a mean-looking building. Beyond some trees I could see the roof of a much larger house. Those who work in the cookhouse are always well-fed, while stable boys are, often as not, hungrier than the horses. The soldier shouted a name, and a little while later a door was opened slightly. An enormous head appeared, blinking its eyes as if the man it belonged to had just been awakened. "Lord Akiyama told me to bring these two here," the soldier grinned. He was happy to hand us over to someone else. "I suppose we could roast the little one and make soup of the big one." The man opened the door wider. To my surprise, it was only his head that was so big. The body belonged to it that was of no great size. "Boil them or roast them, it's all the same to me." With a wave of his hand, the soldier turned on his heel and left. "Come." Opening the door fully, the man made a motion to shoo us inside. I looked at Yone. I knew she was frightened, but she obeyed, and I followed her into the dark room beyond.